If you're a fan of Silent Hill, you've almost certainly heard of the new round of rumors of a new Silent Hill title coming soon. They're not actually new rumors, they're a continuation of the same rumors from back in 2018, shared by the same person on Twitter, Aesthetic Gamer. This is also the same person who correctly shared information before Resident Evil 8 was announced about how Village was going to be about a village and the werewolves and all that jazz. So this isn't just some rando on the internet. This is somebody with video game industry connections that's been right before. Now, the original rumors in 2018 were really vague. There wasn't that much about them. He basically said, Konami's looking for people to make the next Silent Hills. They want to do two of them, a reboot and a continuation. And he also later, I think, said that 2019, one of the projects had begun, but it was in the early stages. That was really all that was announced, and there wasn't anything as like proof that was shown alongside it. And from there, that was basically it. Later, of course, all of that abandoned and blue box nonsense came up, but from what I've seen, I don't think any of that was from Aesthetic Gamer or had anything to do with the projects he was talking about. I don't know, I haven't 100% read his Twitter account, but this seems to have been a completely separate thing that just went nuts because Kojima and conspiracy theories and people not letting go of things and being ridiculous. Not to mention the fact that Keiichiro Toyama started his own game company and started announcing things and working on a horror game, and people couldn't help hoping that this was Silent Hill. No, it's not. It's his own thing, which is awesome, and I'm very excited for it. Now, we have new rumors from Aesthetic Gamer as to the projects that he mentioned in 2018, this time with visual proof. A series of images that are supposed to be from the game. I cannot show them because they were immediately taken down by copyright claim, and according to Aesthetic Gamer, the claim was done by, you guessed it, Konami. Seeing that, I was immediately curious and decided to poke around on the internet and see what I thought about the possibility that in the last couple of years, Konami's been working on a Silent Hill game. And what I see is promising. Looking at what was shared, the pictures in particular, and the timeline of things Konami's been up to in the last couple of years, paints a picture of someone that's building up to a Silent Hill announcement. When that announcement's going to come? Who knows? But it seems like it's coming. Now first, let's talk about the Silent Hill timeline. Starting around 2015, the Silent Hill brand went very quiet for a while. They did very little with the name. You'd maybe see Silent Hill pop up in an article about some kind of an announcement once per year. In 2016, they make an agreement with Mondo to release vinyl records of the Silent Hill soundtracks, but they don't actually start releasing them until the next year. We get the first one in April of 2017. There was also a small crossover with the Bomberman game that was released in June of 2017. And that was really it. From around 2015 to 2019, Silent Hill was basically dead. And then we get to 2019, and all of a sudden, Silent Hill is very powerfully brought back to life out of nowhere. In March of 2019, we get the second Silent Hill vinyl by Mondo. In July of that year, Fangamer releases a Silent Hill collection of merchandise. Okay, cool start. In March of 2020, Fangamer adds a new item, the Silent Hill hoodie. This absolutely delightful thing. And in May of 2020, we get our first Silent Hill crossover with another video game, Dead by Daylight, the online multiplayer themed around horror stories. In June of 2020, the Silent Hill soundtracks to 2, 3, and 4 are all added to Spotify. And in July of that year, Konami creates an official Silent Hill Twitter account. Not Konami in general, Silent Hill in particular. In October of 2020, Silent Hill 4 The Room is re-released digitally on GOG, which comes out of nowhere and surprises everyone. In March of 2021, Silent Hill has another gaming crossover with a title called Monsters and Mortals. That same month, Gecko re-releases the old Robbie the Rabbit t-shirts, and Mezco releases a Bubblehead nurse figure. April 2021, Fangamer releases a Robbie the Rabbit plush. In June 2021, we see the first Silent Hill skateboards. That's also around the time that Bloober Team and Konami announced their partnership. In July of 2021, Mezco releases figurines of Pyramid Head and the Nurse. In August, there's another Silent Hill hoodie, this time directly from Konami. And in September, they celebrate the Silent Hill 2 anniversary with some new merchandise. And a company called Super Groupies announces their own Silent Hill 2 line. In October, Silent Hill 3 and Silent Hill 4 get their vinyls. There's a partnership with Artovision to create some Silent Hill shadow boxes, and James Sunderland is added to Dead by Daylight. Also, that month's Loot Crate included a Pyramid Head figure. November, Silent Hill gets a Christmas sweater alongside a bunch of other properties from Konami, and First 4 Figures releases a Pyramid Head statue. In December, we get a bunch more Silent Hill merchandise on the Konami store. In January of 2022, the Nendoroid Company announces a Robbie the Rabbit figure. And in March, we get the wild announcement of a series of Silent Hill skateboards. When the first Silent Hill skateboard is released in March, it's released alongside a huge collection of Silent Hill 1 themed merchandise, and that pattern continues with the release of the Silent Hill 2 skateboard in early April, and the Silent Hill 3 skateboard later that month. Presumably, the 4th skateboard that's supposed to be released this month will also have a themed set of Silent Hill 4 merchandise, which leads to about 50 new items just for Silent Hill, all centered around this very popularized release of these skateboards over a period of time, something that Konami's really been hyping up. They've been using it to draw attention to their Twitter account, which again, they've only just recently, in the last couple of years, made for Silent Hill. What's going on? Consider that their other properties all have had merchandise added to their various sites, but nothing like this. Nothing with game crossovers, nothing with so much. Going from having 1 or 2 items a year to dozens per year is wild. The only thing that comes kind of close is Castlevania, but Castlevania doesn't have this much stuff and had its own TV show, which is part of why there's been merchandise. It's for the show, not for a new game. But Silent Hill doesn't have anything else going on except for supposedly another movie being made eventually, and maybe these video games. The timeline matches. Why haven't we actually heard anything officially? Well, we have to consider, for one, that in 2020, the arrival of COVID led to a lot of delays and a lot of changes in the game industry. Japan and Konami specifically have moved to working in remote conditions. There's been incidences where employees with COVID have been at the office and then Konami shut down to clean up, and so there's been delays. So theoretically, if a game for 2019 was supposed to be out by now, it might not be because things have slowed down a lot. Now, why wouldn't they go ahead and just say we have a Silent Hill game coming yet? I think they would wait for as long as possible to be absolutely certain that the game is definitely gonna go. Because if they end up announcing it early and then having to cancel because of financial or COVID-related issues, that's just gonna bring back bad memories of what happened, before. And that's a lot of bad publicity that they've tried to make everyone forget very, very hard. So theoretically, if this game started in 2019, they'd keep it on the down low for as long as possible, and possibly have planned for it to have been announced or at least mostly finished by now, and hope, maybe, to have announced it alongside all this merchandise, only for 2020 to slow everything down and lead to a bunch of merchandise planned with no game to go with it. It's a theory. It's a possibility. I don't know for certain. Now, what makes it seem like these pieces of artwork are attached to a Silent Hill? One of them is a concept art of this hallway covered in post-it notes with this pink highlight to it, and at the end of it stands a monstrous figure with a strange head. The head looks like it's kind of covered in the post-its, like paper mache, and again, there's this pink highlight. Now, immediately, a monster with a strange head. That's a Masahiro Ito classic. It's one of his favorite kinds of designs. And the artwork is signed by Masahiro Ito in his style. He always signs it in English and usually puts a little box around his name, and he typically puts a date as well, though not always. This picture is dated, and it's for 2020. There are a lot of things about Masahiro Ito personally that make this seem very viably his project and very viably a possible Silent Hill. If it's not Silent Hill and it's still Masahiro Ito, I'm going to consider that a win. For many years, Masahiro Ito's projects have unfortunately suffered from cancellation. Right after Silent Hill 3, he was put on another project by Konami, which eventually was canceled, and Masahiro Ito left the company in 2006. From there, he ended up working on a couple of more projects, mostly horror and sci-fi themed, which were all canceled, including a Silent Hill game in 2013. For a while, this really seemed to be something he struggled with, though he did have some smaller projects as a concept artist. He worked some on Nightcry, he did some concept arts for an event for World of Tanks, he did some work for Shadows of the Damned, and other small projects here and there, but he's not been very heavily involved with a project in a while from the looks of his Twitter account. Until one day he announces, January 4th, 2020, he announces, "I'm working on a title as a core member. I hope the title won't be canceled." Ooh, it's the first time in a while he's announced working on something. He's been asked multiple times if he's still working on that title, and in June 2021, he said yes, he was. And still seems to be to this day that he's working on the title. He won't say anything about it and mentions NDAs when he talks about it, but it seems like he's been heavily involved in a major project for at least a couple years and as a core member. Now, when he talks about what he wants to do in horror, he does mention that he isn't majorly interested in another Silent Hill, but he'd do it if he had more control over it, and that specifically, he's really tired of the old style of Silent Hill. For one, he doesn't want to use Pyramid Head again. For another, he doesn't want to use the same art style again. The blood, gore, the metal, the rust, the grime, he's done with it. What he'd really like to do is a new style of horror, something different than he's done before. And one of the ideas that he mentions in 2018 is a cherry blossom themed horror. Cherry blossom trees as one of horror materials. A more lyrical horror. He doesn't want something like splatter or gore. He doesn't like that style. And again, he's tired of the rust, the grime, the blood that's already been done to death in Silent Hill. What's important and memorable about this comment is that concept art that is supposedly by Masahiro Ito in 2020. It's a head with strange paper coming off it that glows pink, almost like a cherry tree. And it's a strange head monster, one of Masahiro Ito's favorite things. It looks very much exactly like what he was talking about, and the timeline matches when these games were supposed to have been started on. It all fits. This could be the new Silent Hill, and it could be being worked on by Masahiro Ito. Very big, very cool. Now, what we have to consider is the inevitable problem that has already arisen with people being majorly negative about this whole thing, but making fun of the art as being cringe or predictable or so like Resident Evil or what have you, so modern, so not Silent Hill. And we've already fallen into the trap we've fallen into so many times before. Liking things is subjective. There will always be people who think Silent Hill 2 is not that great. There are. I've met them, and they found my YouTube comments. There will be people who like things that you don't like and hate things that you do. It's just the way that the world works. Liking is subjective. Silent Hill 2 is not actually the best video game ever made because there is no such thing. It doesn't exist. The problem with liking things this way and immediately deriding these games because maybe it's made by Bloober Team or doesn't it look cringy, it's written on her forehead like she's the Joker. You haven't even seen the game yet. You've barely seen anything yet, and being so hypercritical isn't helpful. What does it do? It just makes things more prone to failure yet again. If this game does come out and all people do is complain about it and it fails, what does that do for Silent Hill? Nothing. The problem that people don't seem to realize is good art, bad art, doesn't matter. All art is valuable. Because as long as there is art, we can have a conversation. If a new Silent Hill comes out, whether it's good or it's bad, people are going to talk about it. They're going to make fan art of it. They're going to write things about it, whether it's to fix things they didn't like or if it's to write an essay about how they would improve it. Or they'll make videos about it. They'll do live streams of it. New things will come of a new game, good or bad. And when that happens, new folks will be introduced to Silent Hill. A new Silent Hill title will be made easily available. People that have never heard of or played them before will get the chance to. And then they'll find the people on the internet who also like it, and they'll get to talk about it. And then the search term will go up, and it'll become easier to find stuff about it, and easier for people who make the stuff to profit and be able to make the stuff, rather than what happens now, where a lot of Silent Hill content is slowly slipping down the drain. It's becoming harder and harder to talk about this stuff because how long can you beat a dead horse? It's been years since we've had a new Silent Hill, and I'm one of the lucky ones that's managed to make something of a career out of this. And even I have seen how Silent Hill, compared to other major titles, is slowly slipping downhill. The numbers are going down. There was a big rush with the abandoned Blue Box controversy, and numbers were up for a while. Now that that's gone and it seems like there's no new Silent Hill, people have lost interest again. And if nothing happens, eventually it's all just going to fade out and die away, and Silent Hill will just be a memory. And 20 years from now, new video game fans are not going to know what it is. Resident Evil's still out here and alive, and there's a generation of people that grew up playing new Resident Evil games, for whom 8 and 7 were their first experience of the series. And that hasn't happened for Silent Hill. I just hope that Silent Hill fans will be open-minded, and not immediately jump on hating this game just because it's not what it was before. What everyone seems to want is a contradiction, because everyone complains that Pyramid Head is in everything, and all the games are copying Silent Hill 2. But they also don't want a game that's first-person, or modern, or looks different. They want the games they already grew up with. They want the games they already like, but they also want something new and fresh. How do you accomplish that if nothing's allowed to change? I've always feared that if Keiichiro Toyama or someone like that returned to Silent Hill and made a new game in their own style, that this very heavily negative fan base, who's always claimed they wanted Team Silent to come back, would immediately jump on them and hate whatever they were working on because it would be new and different and changed. Toyama loves experimenting. Look at Siren. And Masahiro Ito, he's tired of the blood and grime and rust. He wants to do something different. And if this is his vision of a new Silent Hill, I am on board to see what he wants to create. And maybe you guys should just breathe for a minute and give the guy a chance.